She wasn't looking for a miracle, just a place to work with her hands and maybe escape the weight of everything she'd lost. That's how Raina Alvarez, a mechanic with nothing but grit and a stubborn belief in second chances, found herself staring at a rusted tin shed on the outskirts of town. For $100, she signed her name and called it hers, even though the sagging roof and splintered walls looked more like a death trap than a workshop. Most people would have laughed at the idea of fixing it up, but for Raina it wasn't about looks, it was about freedom. No boss, no schedule, no one telling her she was too small or too quiet to run her own shop. Just her and her tools, but destiny had other plans. While sweeping the floor one morning, her boot struck something hollow beneath the boards. It wasn't wood, it was metal. And when she pried open the hidden hatch, she uncovered a ladder vanishing into darkness. What waited beneath wasn't junk, wasn't forgotten. It was buried on purpose. And once she climbed down, she realized she wasn't just stepping into a basement. She was stepping into a secret that had been sleeping for decades. The air grew colder as Raina's boots hit the dirt floor 12 feet below. Her flashlight swept across smooth concrete walls, rusted pipes, and faded yellow stripes that ran like road lines into the darkness. Numbers stenciled on the walls, C3 load zone, whispered of an industrial or even military origin. This wasn't a crawl space. It was a tunnel, intentional, engineered, and buried deep beneath a condemned shed no one cared about. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from the kind of challenge she'd always thrived on, the unknown daring her to dig deeper. As she followed the tunnel, it split, one direction blocked by a sealed steel door with a dead control panel, the other leading to a collapsed chamber. Choosing the open path, she stumbled into a hidden room filled with lockers, crates, and a heavy metal toolbox engraved with a name: M. Granger. Inside were precision tools and schematics unlike anything she had seen, diagrams sealed in plastic, formulas beyond her training, and notes hinting at something electrical, something unfinished. Whoever Granger was, he hadn't been tinkering. He'd been building. That night Raina couldn't sleep. Sitting in her truck, staring at the shed, she realized this wasn't just a fluke. This was deliberate. This was buried. And something inside her told her it wasn't abandoned, it was hidden. Driven by obsession, Raina returned with a notebook in hand, determined to investigate. She found more crates stamped with a strange Eagle insignia logo, old surplus sensors, and even a dead Geiger counter, a clue that whatever happened here wasn't small. In a rusted desk drawer, she discovered a leather-bound journal with a name embossed in fading gold: Michael Granger. Inside, the entries dated back to 1968, speaking of tunnel construction phase 2, chamber integrity stable, and prototype testing. The final line of the first entry chilled her. God help us if the math is right. As she flipped through the pages, the handwriting grew urgent, almost frantic. Must ensure no access without override key. If discovered, deny existence. Tunnel must remain ghosted. Ghosted, erased, forgotten. But here it was, alive under her boots. She read until dawn, realizing this was no hobby project. It was experimental. Something designed in secrecy, funded in silence, then buried when the world wasn't ready. And now, fate had dropped it into her lap. For the first time in years, Raina felt something more powerful than survival: purpose. She wasn't just fixing an abandoned shed anymore. She was unearthing a legacy that someone had sworn to keep buried forever. The more she studied, the more the pieces lined up. Granger hadn't been working alone. A scribbled note in the journal led her to Evelyn Granger, Michael's wife, a retired engineer living 2 towns over. When Raina nervously introduced herself, Evelyn's storm-gray eyes studied her in silence before she finally whispered, I hoped someone would come. Without hesitation, Evelyn handed her a small plastic keycard, the word override stamped across it. Her hands trembled as she explained. Michael wasn't building a weapon. He was building a safeguard, something to balance what others were trying to harness. Raina drove back before sunset, the keycard heavy in her pocket. That night she slid it into the panel beside the sealed steel door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights shifted from red to green and gears groaned awake after decades of silence. The vault hissed open, revealing a domed chamber untouched by time. In its center stood a cylindrical machine wrapped in copper coils, humming faintly as though it had been waiting all along. The panel flickered alive with blue text, stabilizer core, calibration required. Raina didn't know what a stabilizer core was, but she knew deep in her bones that this was what Granger had died protecting, and what Evelyn had kept waiting for her to finish. The schematics weren't written for scientists. They were written for hands like hers, torque specs, wiring paths, calibration notes, blueprints that spoke the universal language of someone who worked with machines. For days, she lived underground, tracing circuits, reattaching wires, and cross-referencing Granger's notes. The hum of the core became her heartbeat, steady and alive. But then came the shadows. A black SUV parked half a block away. Mailboxes rifled through. Torn notebook pages left in her trash like warnings. Someone else knew. The machine wasn't just a secret anymore, it was a target. Raina stashed the most important documents beneath her truck floorboards and called in the only person she trusted, James, her oldest friend in the trade. Without hesitation, he joined her underground. Together, they worked in shifts, balancing circuits and grounding stabilizers until finally the machine revealed its purpose. A rotating model of Earth flickered onto the console. Fault lines, magnetic fields, atmospheric data. Granger hadn't built a weapon, he had built a correction, a safeguard against magnetic decay, and according to the readings, the Earth was already slipping into danger. The stabilizer wasn't optional, it was necessary, and time was running out. Raina and James stood before the machine as the final calibration screen blinked. Initiate stabilization sequence. Her hand hovered, trembling. Once she pressed that button, there'd be no turning back. If Granger's math was wrong, if the machine failed, they could unleash something catastrophic. But if he was right and the poles were drifting, this was humanity's last shot at balance. James gave her the smallest nod, the kind of trust born only from years of grit and grease shared between friends. She pressed her palm against the console. A low, steady tone filled the chamber, not violent, not destructive, but harmonic, like the Earth itself was exhaling. The rotating model stabilized, the warnings disappeared, and the system shifted into standby. Silence followed, but it wasn't emptiness, it was peace. Granger had been right. The machine wasn't about power, it was about harmony. And with that button press, Raina hadn't just uncovered history. She had carried it forward, finishing the work he started half a century ago. She stood taller, her pulse calm, as though the Earth itself was steady beneath her feet again. They sealed the vault, returned the keycard to Evelyn, and swore silence. No government calls, no news headlines, no fame, just the truth carried quietly in their hands. Above ground, Raina reopened the shed as core mechanics, a humble repair shop for the locals. But something in her had shifted. She walked taller. She mentored teenagers, teaching them to hear what engines didn't say, to care for machines with grit and patience. She became the kind of mechanic people trusted not just with their cars but with their stories. Yet at night, when the world was quiet, she'd climb down into the tunnel just to sit beside the stabilizer core. Its steady hum was a reminder of what she'd finished, what she'd protected. A reminder that sometimes the world's greatest heroes don't wear capes or make headlines. Sometimes they're just mechanics, holding wrenches, fixing what others gave up on, safeguarding the world one bolt at a time. And so the story of Raina Alvarez, the woman who bought a rusted shed for $100 and uncovered a machine that could stabilize the Earth's magnetic field, isn't about glory or credit. It's about grit, curiosity, and the refusal to walk away from something that matters. She didn't just find a secret, she became its guardian. And maybe, just maybe, thanks to her, the world spins a little steadier tonight. But what about you? What would you have done if you found that hatch under your feet? Would you have walked away, or would you have dared to turn the key? If stories like this make you wonder what secrets might still be buried beneath our world, then don't just listen and leave. Subscribe now because we've got more hidden truths, forgotten legends, and untold stories waiting for you every week. And trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.